On this week's Talk of Him, we talk about when you're not really loved or even liked in the situation of Zacchaeus, the tax collector.
Yeah, and we'll also talk about how the way we treat others that we don't like is where true discipleship begins. That and more coming your way.
Hello and welcome to Talk of Him, and happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
To really only a few countries, not the whole world.
Yeah.
Some countries
But it's
celebrate
still
different.
just worth celebrating Mom anywhere you are today.
It's true. They
Every
deserve
day's a good day
shout-out.
to celebrate mothers.
Yes. This week we have a lot of reading to comb through.
Yeah.
Matthew 21 through 23, Mark 11, Luke 19 through 20, and John 12.
Yeah.
So the Gospels are hitting it at all the different angles. And we're going to have a spirit-directed conversation. Specifically, I'd like to start with a discussion on worth, which I think brings up what we've talked about the last couple of weeks. I feel like
I love the story you've chosen.
Yeah, it's another hit. It's one of my favorite stories, maybe because I'm married to an accountant and I have a name that's hard to pronounce. I don't know. So this is the story we're going to read in Luke 19, verses 5 and 7. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said unto him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must abide at thy house. And when they saw it, they all murmured, saying that he was gone to be a guest with a man that is a sinner. So in Luke 19, we are reading the story about Zacchaeus, this short, wealthy tax collector in Jericho, who was definitely not the popular guy in town. Like,
Tax collectors aren't popular?
No.
But your husband's popular, but he's an accountant.
Right, he doesn't love calling the IRS. So I've heard many years of murmuring around tax collectors.
Okay.
So in fact, that this man is hated, and then Jesus sees him up in the sycamore tree.
Yeah.
Right, and he could see the Savior from that angle because he was not like my son. He was short in stature.
He was diminutive.
Yes. And when he called him down and asked to go visit in his home, like in cultural terms, that was a pretty big deal. That was like saying, like, we're besties.
Yeah.
So he's signaling to all these townspeople, and they're shocked because the Savior is going to spend time with a sinner, which, you know, to quote The Chosen, get used to different. Like, Jesus is going to hang out with the sinners. And in this story, he's teaching this beautiful lesson about worth. We talked about it with the lost silver.
Yes.
We talked about it with the prodigal son. We talked about it with the laborers in the vineyard. Like, this has been the theme the last few weeks. And I think, no wonder I'm in a good mood for me. Because God is really trying to teach that maybe the town you're in or the followers on social media or whoever it is not thinking you're the coolest whatever. But Jesus is seeing the worth of this man when others ignored him and
saying, come out of the
hated him.
tree, let's hang out.
Let's hang out. President Henry B. Eyring, and this quote is in your Find Him study guide if you have a copy of that, where President Eyring talks about, from May 2017, walking with the Savior will change the way you look at others. He will teach you to see them through his eyes, which means seeing past an outward appearance and into the heart. This is how he was able to see Zacchaeus, not as the corrupt tax collector others saw, but as an honest, upright son of Abraham. If you walk with the Savior long enough, you will learn to see everyone as a child of God with limitless potential, regardless of what his or her past may have been. And I feel like what a beautiful invitation to be on the disciples' path. And I think you talked about it the beginning of this month, that it's easy to love the people that are easy to love. It's the people that are harder to love that really our discipleship is called into question. Interesting note, as I was researching the meaning of Zacchaeus, it means Yah remembers and Yah is pure. And in Hebrew, Yah, right, is interchangeable for what they would say.
Jehovah, Jesus.
Jehovah or Jesus. So Jehovah remembers. Interesting that Zacchaeus is named that because
That's so cool.
Jesus is walking through town and sees him, and Jesus is pure. And so the world saw him as someone to be hated and rejected, but the meaning of his name meant so much more. And it reminded me of my own journey with an odd name. And a few seasons ago, when our viewers may remember when Scott was like total surprised me and revealed that the meaning of my name meant Garden of God. And I just like wept because it was a name that I was teased incessantly in school and horrible things were said. And all of a sudden it's like, you don't want to grow up with the name that's the unique, weird name. And then kids have great ways of figuring out ways to make something awkward even more awkward. And that kind of trauma. And then in that moment when Scott's like, but your name means the Garden of God, I was like,
oh, he knew what he was doing there.
I know, he totally did. But I just was so emotional and realized like in that moment, I had this little like healing experience where God saw me different. God saw who I was. And as a teenager who felt awkward and sometimes like I wasn't fitting in and teased and I was the only member of the church and right, that God sees us. And that's what we're seeing here with Zacchaeus. Exactly. Like the world may label us whether we are of worth or not, but in God's eyes, we're all of worth.
Zacchaeus is the lost piece of silver, right? No one sees him, but his value is the same as everyone else's. And God rejoices when he finds him. And he saw him, and no one else saw that worth and value, but God did, and so he was hanging out with him.
Yeah, and I feel like Jesus is also signaling to this group of people. Like, he's not just, I feel like the Savior in what we see in the New Testament packs in like layers of lessons. It wasn't just maybe inviting Zacchaeus to see himself differently, but he was signaling to everyone else like, wait, if this is the guy I'm going to single out and invite myself to his house and we're going to sit and have a meal together, which was intimate and about connection and friendship, how are you judging everybody else in the town?
Right.
I mean, I think the woman at the well and how they must have judged her knowing her history, right?
Sure.
And so what President Eyring says is so key. As we start to see ourselves as God sees us, I think that's the moment in which I start to see others the way God sees.
Sure, it's like they're inseparable.
Right.
Right, yeah. You can't see others clearly until you see yourself clearly and vice versa.
Because when you're around people that struggle with sense of worth, they really translate that in how they see the world.
100%, man. They're inseparable.
Yeah.
That's humbling. I want to hearken back to something Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, talking about this same sort of principle, and especially in terms of like, what does true discipleship look like in the way we treat others? And Matthew 5, this is Sermon on the Mount, verses 46 and 47. You'll remember we hit this some time ago. Jesus says, if you love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? And if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans so? So in other words, for me and you and I, when we were talking about this the other day before, when we were prepping together, we were just like, we want to preach on this, right? But I mean, can we just all stop pretending like we're so amazing when we are nice to people that are nice to us, or that when we are respectful to people that are respectful to us? Anyone can do that. That's not hard. And I would even argue, if that's discipleship, that's preschool discipleship.
Right.
Okay. But true discipleship begins where agreement ends. True discipleship begins where comfort ends. Put differently, true discipleship begins where contention begins. True discipleship begins where offenses occur, where pain and insult are felt, where annoyance is experienced toward another. That's true discipleship. That's where it starts. That's the starting point.
And that's why Zacchaeus, as the corrupt tax collector, like, I was thinking about this when we were talking about it.
Yeah.
I can also be really good at forgiving if I don't have to keep interacting with someone.
Right.
So I think true discipleship starts when you still got to see the person every single day or whatever. Like you're still working with them.
A family member, a friend, a coworker, whatever. Like that's where discipleship starts, brothers and sisters. That's not anyone, we're not rewarded for being kind and polite and sweet to people that are kind and polite and sweet to us. That's just natural. That's almost just like automatic, right? It doesn't even take effort.
It's not requiring anything of our character, our spirits.
Discipleship begins where comfort ends. Consider the teachings of Jesus in this week's Come Follow Me readings. I picked this part from President Oak's talk on our last episode of Talk of Him conference talks.
Yes. I was going to mention that because I feel like these are all the words of Jesus, and that's what his whole talk was about.
100%. The lawyer, you'll remember, asked Jesus, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So I can't emphasize enough for myself, and I'm preaching to myself primarily.
Oh yeah.
And I want everyone to know that.
Yeah, we can have this safe conversation in the studio. It's when we leave here and we're living it.
I'm preaching to myself. Yeah. Oh, I'm good at being nice to people that are nice to me. But when someone does something petty, they cut me off while I'm driving, they take one of my weights I was going for. Oh, they get to the calf machine before me. And I was clearly heading there.
You know, all the Talk of Him viewers that see you at the gym are about to come up to you.
Now they're all paranoid.
Yes. Wait, did we take the bench from John this week?
No, but for real, that's where discipleship begins. And I have to tell myself that regularly whenever I'm in that moment.
I feel like it's deeper for me. I feel like it's some of the old trauma and it shows up in new situations that I have to really, I'm invited to take it to the Lord and say, oh, I guess I get to do more healing here because I keep responding to this person in a traumatic way. I wanted to throw in a President Nelson quote from this most recent conference.
Please do.
Because I feel like it's going to be a landmark talk outside of the church even.
Oh, I loved it so much.
Don't you think?
100%.
I feel like it's going to raise the bar on not just maybe in secular settings, it won't be called discipleship, but in peacemaking and in...
It was so simple, but for some reason, and I've talked to a lot of people who had this similar experience, I just felt a testimony through the Spirit that God was speaking through His prophet.
And He was speaking to the whole world.
As profoundly as I've ever felt it when the prophet has spoken. It was crazy. And it wasn't even about the nature of the talk. It was so simple and beautiful, but there was just something.
Right. Beautiful. I agree. Yeah. So this is what President Nelson said just in the recent conference talk. And if you haven't been able to study that, we haven't yet talked about it on Talk of Him conference talks, but the best is yet to come for those who spend their lives building up others. I love that because I think it goes back to the last few weeks of Come Follow Me, from the prodigal son to the laborer in the vineyard to Zacchaeus, to all this theme of if you're going to be kind to others, good is still coming for you. And then he says, today I invite you to examine your discipleship within the context of the way you treat others. I bless you to make any adjustments that may be needed so that your behavior is ennobling, respectful, and representative of a true follower of Jesus Christ. I bless you to replace belligerence with beseeching, animosity with understanding, and contention with peace.
Perfecto.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Mic drop.
Yeah. I love Matthew 25:45. It's not in this week's reading, but let's not forget that the two great laws, love God and love people, are inseparable. It's one and the same. Because remember, they asked Jesus, they're like, when have we done these things to you? When have we been nice to you? Or when have we been mean to you? And he's like, whenever you've done those to anybody. And so I'm going to put it this way. Here's the sobering fact, the sobering principle for me, for John. Okay, and I know it's going to be sobering for lots of people in the world. If I don't love others, especially people I don't like, right? If I don't love them, then I don't love God as much as I think I do. That's...
Ouchie.
That hurts. Yeah, that gets me. That gets me, and I gotta think a long time about that. But if I say if I say this, I've heard this said before, I love God, I just don't do good with others. Sorry, man. You're gonna have to investigate that a little bit more, because that's not how it works. Because
don't you believe that once you have a clear understanding of divine identity, and I think we're going to talk about it this week on our general conference talk, then we can really access this divine power, enabling power that allows us. I'm not saying we don't need to have boundaries. I think
Sure.
loving people
Sure.
does not mean you give full access.
Absolutely.
Jesus didn't give access
Right.
to everybody.
Right.
But am I still triggered? Like you shared, maybe it was last season, like if you see them ahead of you in line on the way to the
Right.
pearly gates, are you going to be like, wait,
wait.
how'd you get in front of me? I know what you did in 1987.
Or just like you jumped in front of me at the calf machine, you're trying to do it again in heaven.
John, all the gym people are going to be talking to you this week. Please go bug John at the gym
Please
this
do.
week.
You'll see I'm a lot nicer than you think. I like another reframe we gave at the beginning of the season, that we are the Pharisees. Great moment to practice that.
Right.
In Matthew 23, think about Jesus' rebuking of the Pharisees as him rebuking us and the way we treat others. If we are the type of person that's like, oh yeah, I love God so much, I just don't like people. This is what he might say to me. Woe unto you, John, hypocrite, for you pay your tithe, your tithing, but you've omitted the weightier matters of the law. Right? Oh, you're great at this and that, checking all these boxes, John, but you've omitted judgment, mercy, faith. Woe unto you, John, hypocrite, for you're like a whited sepulchre, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and all of uncleanness. Even so ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. And so I just
Those
say,
are powerful verses.
those
man.
are. And if we read them like we're the Pharisees, we can take one right in the chin.
Yeah.
And I need to, and so I'm taking it. But just remember here the principle that discipleship begins where natural familiarity and unity end. And so whenever you find yourself and you're like, I really don't like that person, bing,
That's your
discipleship now begins.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. You ready to give the invitation?
That's it. Are you
Okay.
ready? Okay, it's a hard invitation. Here's the invitation that might stretch us all to our limits this week. But we want you to think of someone you struggle with.
Oh.
Okay? It could be someone at work or church or in your family or in this studio. Just kidding. Anyone
John
who triggers
is dropping some secrets.
anyone who triggers you. No, I'm thinking everyone else how they feel like me behind camera. Anyone who triggers you this week, try praying every single day and ask God to help you see them and understand their heart as He does. And then after your 7-day experiment, see if you feel differently. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Talk of Him, and we hope you'll join us next week. Talk of Him is brought to you by Covenant Communications.
Make sure you follow us on social media and pick up a copy of Find Him Study Guide at Seagull Book or online.